Hello everyone, I wish you peace and happiness. Are you all healthy? Today, I will continue to share with you the difficult, deprived, and struggling days of Huyen and her mother as they tried to make a living. The last rain finally stopped. The weak sunlight began to seep through the gray clouds, shining down on the still wet garden. On the small path leading to the house, De was carrying a large bundle on his shoulder. He thought that the roof of his and Huyen and Appo's house was heavily leaking due to the rain, so he brought the bundle with the intention of patching the roof so that Huyen and Micah wouldn't and Appo's have to endure rain splashes and leaking water whenever a storm came. As he approached the porch, De suddenly heard Pippi barking loudly and urgently. End quote, "Gao! Gao! Gao!" End quote. The barking was different from usual, full of panic and urgency. He looked in the direction where Pippi was standing. Just a few steps away, on the rain-soaked yard, Huyen was lying motionless on the ground. He froze for a moment, his face turning pale with horror. Without thinking, De quickly dropped the bundle and ran swiftly toward Huyen. Pippi was still standing nearby, continuously barking and looking at De as if begging for help. De hurriedly knelt beside Huyen, trembling hands supporting her shoulders. Seeing Huyen and Appo's pale face with blood still on her lips, his heart clenched. He gently shook Huyen, voice full of concern. "Huyen, what in Appo's wrong with you? Huyen, wake up." But Huyen remained still, her eyes tightly closed, her breathing very weak. De softly wiped the blood from her lips, his eyes filled with panic. He looked up at the roof, seeing the tarp still unfinished, then down at Huyen lying on the wet ground. In an instant, he understood that she had tried alone to climb onto the roof to protect Micah from the heavy rain. De bowed his head, voice choked, and quote, "You and Appo's re so foolish. Why did you try so hard alone?" End quote. Pippi stood beside him, softly whimpering and then rubbing her head against Huyen and Appo's arm. The dog looked at De with a pleading expression. De took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. He gently slid one hand under her shoulder and the other under her legs, then mustered all his strength to carry her up. Huyen and Appo's body was limp from fainting, her clothes still soaked from the rain. De took careful steps, avoiding any bumps that might hurt her. Pippi trotted along behind, softly whining as if worried about her owner. Inside the small house, he carefully laid Huyen down on the bed. He placed an old pillow under her head and brushed the wet hair from her face. Seeing Huyen and Appo's pale face and pale lips, his heart clenched. He softly called and quote, "Huyen, can you hear me? Open your eyes." End quote. But Huyen remained still, her breathing faint. De quickly grabbed a clean towel hanging in the corner of the house. He carefully wiped the blood remaining around the corner of her mouth and her Huyen and Appo's ear, each movement very gentle, afraid of causing her more pain. Seeing Huyen and Appo's pale face, De couldn't and Appo's hide his worry. He softly brushed the wet strands of hair on her forehead and whispered, "Huyen, please try to wake up." At that moment Micah had also woken up. Seeing her mother lying still on the bed, the girl hurriedly crawled over, her eyes red and teary. Micah gently lay down, hugging her mother, pressing her cheek against Huyen and Appo's arm as if hoping her mother would open her eyes. The girl softly held her mother and Appo's cold hand, tears silently rolling down her small face. De looked at the cloth in his hand, which was already stained with blood, then quickly grabbed the small basin and stepped outside to get more clean water. After the heavy rain, the ground in front of the house had turned into muddy slush. The rainwater still pooled in small puddles, making the yard and walkway slippery. De took each step very carefully, his feet testing the solid ground to avoid falling. He still carried the heavy worry for Huyen, who was lying unconscious inside the house, but he tried to stay calm. Approaching the water jar placed in the corner of the porch, De bent down to fill a basin with clean water. He carefully lifted the basin, holding it firmly with both hands, then slowly turned back into the house. I placed a basin of water beside the bamboo bed, then took a towel and gently cleaned the remaining dirt on it. He wrung the towel out thoroughly, then carefully wiped Huyen and Appo's face. He wiped each spot carefully around her mouth, near her ears, and then down to her cold hands and feet. Do and Appo's hands still trembled with worry, but each movement was very gentle, as if afraid of hurting Huyen. Micah was now fully awake. Seeing her mother lying still and unresponsive, the girl nervously crawled over and lay on top of Huyen, wrapping her arms around her mother. Mom, please wake up. Micah softly called out, her voice choked with emotion. Do quickly and gently helped Micah down. He carried the girl to the side, whispering softly, Be good, Micah, don't lie on your mother. Let her breathe easily. She's just tired. Micah looked at her mother, her eyes still full of worry, but following Do's words, she sat close to the bed and held her mother's hand. Do pulled the old blanket over and gently covered Huyen's body to keep her warm. He adjusted the blanket, looked at her pale face and sighed softly. Do sat beside Huyen for a while, feeling her body still icy cold. He suddenly remembered the ginger in the garden, which could help Huyen warm up after being in the rain for too long. Without hesitation, Do quickly stood up and ran to the back of the house. The garden was still soaked after the rain, with soft, muddy soil underfoot. He bent down to search every corner of the earth, turning over wet leaves to find any remaining ginger roots. After a while, Do was delighted to see a small ginger bush. He quickly dug it up, took a few fresh ginger roots and ran back inside. Do brought the ginger to the front ditch. The water after the rain was still flowing gently, and he sat down to wash each ginger root, removing all the mud stuck on the outside. His hands moved swiftly as he washed the ginger, his eyes constantly looking toward the small house where Huyen was lying on a bamboo bed with Micah. Do brought the washed ginger roots back into the small house. He placed them on the old bamboo table, took a small knife and carefully peeled off the outer skin. Do looked at the bamboo bed and saw Huyen lying still, Micah sitting beside her, holding her mother and Appo's hand. His eyes grew more worried, hoping he could do something to help her. Do hurriedly approached the long-extinguished firewood stove. The logs were still damp from the rain, but he didn't and Appo's give up. He chose smaller sticks, carefully stacked them and took out a lighter. Click. The first time the flame didn't and Appo's ignite. Do tried again. His hands patiently shielded the lighter from the remaining moisture. Click. A tiny spark finally appeared. Do quickly brought it close to the drier logs and gently blew on them. After a while the flame started to catch. The warm red glow gradually filled the cold kitchen, dispelling some of the dampness from the heavy rain. Do let out a relieved sigh, poured a little water into the kettle, and placed it on the stove. The crackling sound of burning wood echoed, blending with the warmth gradually spreading through the small house. Micah sat close to her mother on the bamboo bed. Seeing Uncle Do boiling hot water, the girl looked at the ginger slices in her hand and wanted to help her mother herself. Micah and Appo's small hands held a piece of ginger and brought it close to Huyen and Appo's nose, hoping the spicy, warm smell of ginger could wake her up. But her movements were still clumsy, her hands trembling, only doing what she saw adults do. Then Micah took the small towel beside her. She dipped the towel in water and gently wrung it out. Because she was still young, the towel in Micah and Appo's hands was twisted and not yet neat, but she carefully wiped every part of her mother and Appo's face. Mom, please wake up. Micah softly said. She folded the towel and placed it on Huyen and Appo's forehead. The cloth was slightly tilted to one side, and her small hand quickly adjusted it to be straight. Do sat by the firewood stove, carefully watching the weak flames flickering. The pieces of wood soaked in rainwater overnight still remained damp, preventing the fire from catching strongly. He gently nudged the wood with a stick, rearranged the logs, then leaned down to blow. Puff, puff. Da and Apos. S breath blended into the rising white smoke. The smoke from the wet logs billowed out thickly, seeping into the small kitchen, making his eyes sting. Da had to turn his face away slightly and then continue blowing. Although the smoke made him cough lightly, he patiently kept the fire from going out. He added a few small sticks underneath, waiting for the heat to dry the wood gradually. After some effort, small sparks began to burn more evenly. The red glow reappeared in the kitchen. I see that the fire in the stove has burned more steadily, so I feel more at ease to return to the small bamboo table. I place the peeled ginger roots on the table, take an old bowl, and put each slice of ginger into it. The light from the stove casts a warm glow, making the small room feel less cold. I hold the handle of the knife, carefully pounding the ginger slices until they are crushed. The sound of the knife hitting the bowl echoes steadily in the quiet house. The ginger slices gradually break down, releasing a spicy, warm aroma that fills the room. My hands keep working without pause, but my eyes occasionally glance toward the bamboo bed. I see Huyen still lying still, Micah sitting beside her, her small face full of worry. I sigh softly and continue pounding the ginger. I only hope that this ginger water will help Huyen feel warmer, so that the mother who has endured so much hardship can soon open her eyes and wake up. The water boiler on the stove started to boil, and steam was rising thickly. The bubbling sound of boiling water signaled that the ginger tea was ready to be brewed. Da hurriedly stood up and approached the stove. He reached out to lift the kettle, but because the handle had become very hot after being on the fire for a while, the heat directly transferred to his hand, making him flinch. End quote. End quote. Da quickly let go, carefully placing the kettle back down. His hands were burning and instinctively, he raised them to press against both sides of his ears to reduce the burning sensation. I hurriedly ran out to the porch to grab a dry cloth. I just wanted to quickly go back and lift the water pot down so I could prepare ginger tea for Huyen. But after the heavy rain, the ground inside the house was still damp, with mud sticking to every step. In my haste I didn't an Apos. Pay attention to my footing. As I stepped near the stove, my foot suddenly slipped on the muddy ground. End quote. End quote. I lost my balance and fell forward. I tried to put out my hand to break the fall but was too late, and my body hit the edge of the stove. The water jug on the stove was knocked over, tilting to one side and spilling. Hot water from the pot spilled out, steaming on the damp ground. The sound of water pouring combined with the crackling of burning wood made the entire kitchen chaotic. I lay on the floor, stunned for a few seconds from the fall. I quickly sat up, ignoring my pain, and immediately looked toward the water pot. Regardless of the clothes being covered in mud and dirt, he immediately turned towards the kitchen, hoping there was still some hot water to help Huyen. Fortunately, after pouring, the kettle still had a little water inside. He let out a relieved sigh and carefully lifted the kettle. This time he wrapped a cloth around the handle to prevent burning his hand. He quickly brought the kettle of hot water to the bamboo table, where the mashed ginger was still placed. He slowly poured the remaining hot water into the bowl. The steam rose, blending with the warm, spicy ginger aroma that filled the small house. The mashed ginger slices gradually dissolved in the water, forming a warm ginger tea. He used a small spoon to stir gently, then looked at Huyen lying on the bamboo bed. Her face was still pale, but the warmth in the house had returned somewhat. I am holding a warm ginger water bowl in my hand, walking slowly to the bamboo bed. I sit down next to Huyen and gently call, "Huyen, please try to drink a little." I scoop a small spoonful and bring it to her lips. But Huyen is still unconscious and cannot swallow on her own. The ginger water that I just put into her mouth slowly drips out again. I quickly wipe it away with a cloth, my eyes growing more worried. I look at Huyen for a moment and then decide to help her sit up. I gently slip my arm around her shoulder, lift Huyen up and let her lean back against me. Huyen and Apos' body is still weak, her head slightly tilted into my shoulder. I hold the ginger water bowl with one hand and carefully support Huyen with the other. I scoop small spoonfuls and slowly bring them to her mouth. This time, Huyen has swallowed the ginger water bit by bit. I patiently feed her spoonful after spoonful, not rushing, just afraid she might choke. Micah sits beside her, watching her mother, her small hand still holding Huyen and Appo's hand. Seeing that her mother can drink the ginger water, the little girl feels a bit more reassured. They saw that the ginger water was still dripping down Huyen and Appo's collar, so he quickly took a towel and gently placed it under her chin to prevent her clothes from getting wetter. He scooped up small spoonfuls again, patiently bringing them to her lips. Each time, they waited patiently for her to swallow before continuing. But after a few more spoonfuls, Huyen suddenly frowned slightly. Her body trembled, and a sudden strong cough came over her. They was startled and quickly set the bowl down. Huyen bent over and coughed violently, a red streak appearing on the towel, which shocked Da. He hurriedly supported her shoulders, one hand wiping away the bloodstain, his eyes full of panic. "What in Appo's wrong with you? Huyen, open your eyes and look at me." Seeing Huyen weakening, Da didn't and Appo's dare let her sit for long. He gently helped her lie back down on the bamboo bed. Micah sat beside her, frightened when her mother coughed, her eyes beginning to fill with tears. The girl held Huyen and Appo's hand and softly called out, "Mother." They saw Huyen lying on the bamboo bed, her face still pale, her eyes tightly closed and not opening at all. Seeing Huyen and Appo's condition growing weaker, he couldn't and Appo's wait any longer. They gently supported Huyen and Appo's shoulders, helping her sit up. Her body was exhausted, leaning completely on him. "Huyen, hang on, I and Appo's I'll take you to the hospital," he softly said. He turned around carefully, placing his hands to support Huyen, and then bent down so she could lean on his back. Using all his strength, they carried Huyen on his back. Huyen and Appo's hands relaxed and fell onto his shoulders, her head resting on Da and Appo's back, still unconscious. Da looked over at Micah standing beside the bed, her eyes red from fear. "Micah, quickly put on your slippers. The two of us will take Mom to the hospital." Micah hurriedly nodded. She wiped her tears, ran to get her small slippers and brought them in. Despite still being scared, she obediently followed Da and Appo's instructions. Pippi also tried to stand up, limping as he followed to the door. The dog looked up at Huyen lying on Da and Appo's back, whimpering softly as if wanting to go with her. I bow my head to adjust Huyen and Appo's position to carry her more securely. I wrap her arms around my shoulders, one hand holding her leg to prevent her from slipping down during the move. I walk slowly. However, the ground after the rain is still wet, with mud sticking to my feet, making each step difficult. While carrying Huyen, I also have to carefully watch each step. Every time my foot lands on the slippery ground, I pause slightly to keep my balance. The weight on my back causes my shoulders to ache, but I don and Appo's stop. I and Appo's am only afraid that if I slow down even a little, Huyen and Appo's condition will become more dangerous. Micah walks behind, her small slippers covered in mud. She looks at her mother on my back with worried eyes, not leaving her gaze. When we reach the porch, I have to stop for a moment, leaning on a post to catch my breath. My breathing is heavy, but when I see Huyen still weak on my back, I try to keep going. After leaving the muddy yard in front of the house, he no longer walked slowly but started to walk faster, only hoping to reach the hospital as soon as possible. On Da and Appo's back, Huyen still kept her eyes closed, her weak body leaning against his shoulder. Each of Da and Appo's steps was heavy, but he dared not stop. Behind them, Micah was trotting along. Her small legs were repeatedly pulled back by the mud, but she still tried not to give up. Micah ran while panting, her eyes still fixed on her mother. Despite being tired, she tried to walk quickly to catch up with the two of them. The village road after the rain seemed longer than usual. To cross slippery dirt paths, winding slopes, and then continued through narrow alleys between the fields. Sometimes his shoulders ached and his breath became heavier, but just thinking of Huyen and Micah, De forced himself to keep going. Sweat on his forehead mixed with the remaining raindrops on his hair. His legs were exhausted, but the figure of the woman lying on his back prevented him from stopping. After a long journey crossing many slopes and narrow paths, the gate of the commune health station finally appeared before my eyes. I saw the sign in front, and my heart felt a little lighter. I used all my remaining strength, walked faster, and carried Huyen inside. "Please, help me," I called out loudly as I walked. The medical staff heard the noise and hurried out. I quickly brought Huyen to a nearby bed and gently laid her down. My hand still held Huyen's shoulders for a moment, afraid she might slip down. Seeing her pale face, I gasped for breath from exhaustion, but my eyes never left Huyen. "She fell from the roof, and has been soaked in rain all day. Please help her," I said hurriedly. At this moment Micah also ran in, her small slippers covered in mud. The girl stood beside the bed, holding her mother's hand, her worried eyes watching the medical staff examining Huyen. A healthcare worker gently conducts a preliminary check of Huyen and Appo's condition. They observe the wounds in her mouth and ear, check her breathing, pulse, and reactions. Then they take a blood pressure monitor, carefully wrap the cuff around Huyen and Appo's arm, and begin the measurement. The room becomes silent. De stands close to the bed, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes filled with worry as she watches every move of the healthcare worker. Micah stands at the head of the bed, gently holding her mother and Appo's hand. The girl dares not say anything, only hoping that her mother will open her eyes soon. After the measurement is complete, the healthcare worker records the blood pressure readings and continues to monitor Huyen and Appo's condition to prepare for the next steps of examination and treatment. Micah and De quietly sat beside Huyen and Appo's hospital bed. The small clinic room became silent, only the gentle whir of the fan and the footsteps of medical staff outside could be heard. Micah sat close to her mother, her small hands holding Huyen and Appo's cold hand. The girl bowed her head and softly called out, "Mom, please wake up soon." De sat next to Huyen. He gently took her hand, slowly massaging each finger and arm to help keep her warm. Huyen and Appo's hands remained cold after a day of rain and a fall. De patiently massaged, occasionally looking up at her pale face with a worried expression. "Huyen, try to stay strong. Everyone is waiting for you to wake up." Micah nodded in response, gently placing her hand on her mother and Appo's arm as if to send more warmth. The two quietly sat beside Huyen. One gently massaged her hand, the other held her mother and Appo's hand without letting go. In the small room of the clinic, both De and Micah only wished for one thing: that Huyen would soon open her eyes and safely overcome the critical condition. The doctor approached Huyen and Appo's bedside to examine her more thoroughly. Gently, the doctor checked her condition, observed the scratches, and then asked De about Huyen and Appo's fall and her prolonged exposure to rain. Next, the doctor carefully pressed and palpated different areas on Huyen and Appo's abdomen. Although Huyen was still unconscious, the doctor did not notice any obvious abnormal signs in her abdomen. Afterward, the doctor measured her blood pressure, checked her pulse and breathing again. After reviewing the readings, the doctor nodded slightly. "All current indicators are stable. She may have fainted due to exhaustion after prolonged exposure to rain, overexertion, and physical weakness. We will administer 4 fluids to rehydrate her and monitor her condition further. If any abnormal signs appear or she does not regain consciousness as expected, she will need to be transferred to a higher-level hospital for a more thorough assessment." De then felt somewhat relieved. The medical staff quickly prepared the equipment. They gently disinfected Huyen and Appo's arm, searched for a vein, and carefully inserted the 4 needle. After securing the 4, A bag of 4 fluid was hung on the stand. The clear droplets of fluid began to flow steadily through the tubing into Huyen and Appo's body. Da and Micah were still sitting beside the bed. Micah held her mother and Appo's hand while Da silently watched each drop of the 4 fluid fall, hoping that Huyen would wake up soon. Da looked at Micah gently and said, Micah, stay here with Mom. I and Appo's. I'll go outside for a moment and then come back. Be good, Don and Appo's. Leave Mom. Micah nodded softly. The girl sat close to the hospital bed, lying on her mother and holding her. Da quickly stepped out to the medical station. A little while later, he returned to the hospital room with a small bag in his hand. Inside were some candies and a few boxes of milk he had just bought from the nearby convenience store. He sat down next to Micah, took out a bag of chips, and gently tore open the packaging. Here, Micah, have a little. You haven't and Appo's eaten anything since this morning. You need strength to stay with Mom. Micah obediently took the bag of chips, holding small pieces to eat, but occasionally looked over at Huyen lying there within 4. He smiled kindly and then took out 2 bottles of milk from his bag. He carefully placed them at the foot of the hospital bed, to be used when Micah is thirsty or when Huyen wakes up. Da took a box of milk from under the foot of the bed. He carefully inserted the tube into the milk box and placed it on the small table beside the bed. He looked at Huyen, who was still closing her eyes, the 4 drips still dripping steadily. Da gently called out, Huyen, if you can hear me, try to drink a little. He brought the tip of the tube close to her lips, supporting her shoulder with one hand to tilt her head slightly to the side. Da gently squeezed the side of the milk box to let a tiny amount of milk flow up the tube, just enough to wet Huyen and Appo's lips. He didn't and Appo's dare squeeze hard or try to make her drink more, fearing she might choke if she was unconscious. Seeing that Huyen still had no response, Da stopped, gently wiped the corner of her mouth with a clean cloth, and set the milk box down. He sighed softly, took Huyen and Appo's hand and whispered, It and Appo's okay. Just rest. When you wake up, we and Appo's LL drink together then. He gently stood up and walked over to the window of the hospital room. Outside, after the rain, the sky was still gloomy. Raindrops still clung to the eaves and occasionally fell, creating sad, tinkling sounds. Da put his hand into his shirt pocket, took out the small amount of remaining money. He sat down on a wooden chair by the window, placed the crumpled bills in his palm, and slowly counted them. The amount of money was not much left after buying things, paying for treatment, and taking care of the 2 mother and child. Da looked at the coins in his hand, his gaze lowering. He gently clenched them, worried about the upcoming hospital fees and feeling compassion for Huyen, who had endured so much. But when he turned his head to look inside the room, he saw Micah still sitting beside her mother, while Huyen was lying peacefully within 4 drip hanging beside her. He put the remaining money into his pocket, stood up and walked back to the bed. No matter how difficult it was at this moment, the most important thing for Da was that Huyen must wake up, and the 2 mother and child should not face the days ahead alone. Da sat beside the hospital bed, his eyes still watching Huyen and Appo's every breath. He did not leave, only silently holding her hand, occasionally glancing at the 4 drip bottle that was dripping slowly. After a while, the medical staff entered the room. Let me change to a new 4 bag. The nurse checked the 4 line, then gently locked the old line, removed the empty bottle, and replaced it with a new one. Every movement was careful to avoid waking Huyen or causing her discomfort. Micah sat nearby watching, her small hands resting on the edge of the bed. Is Mom okay? The girl asked softly. The nurse smiled reassuringly. It and Appo's nothing, your mom is being monitored. You can stay beside her. Micah nodded. Da felt a bit more relieved hearing that. He pulled a chair to sit beside the bed and continued to stay with the mother and daughter. After a long day of running around, from the moment he discovered Huyen lying motionless on the ground to carrying her across a long distance to the medical station, he was almost exhausted. He still tried to sit beside the hospital bed, unwilling to take his eyes off Huyen. One hand was placed on the edge of the bed, occasionally glancing at her face to see if there were any signs of awakening. But the fatigue after hours of stress finally made Da and Apo's eyes heavy. The chair beside the bed was a bit cramped, so he leaned his body against the small bed frame, his head slightly bowed. Soon after, Da dozed off without realizing it. His face still bore the look of exhaustion, his hair messy from the rain, clothes not yet changed. His hand remained close to Huyen and Apo's, as if, even in sleep, he wanted to be sure she was still there. The sky gradually darkened in the evening, and the sunlight at the end of the day faded gradually after the remaining clouds from the rain. In the hospital room, Huyen was still lying quietly. The floor drip had become emptier little by little. Da saw Micah sitting by the bed all day, her small eyes already tired, and gently took her hand. Micah let Apo's go outside and sit for a while. Mom is being cared for by the nurses now. Micah looked at her mother one more time and then nodded softly. Da took Micah and Apo's hand and led her out of the hospital room to the small courtyard in front of the clinic. After the rain, the trees outside the yard still had water droplets, and the leaves gently rustled in the cool evening breeze. The two, grandparent and grandchild, sat down on a stone bench under the tree. Micah leaned close to Da, her eyes still fixed on the door of the room where her mother was lying. The two elders and the child sat outside the yard for a long time before getting up. Da gently took Micah and Apo's small hand and led her back to the hospital room. By this time it was already completely dark. The lights in the medical station turned on, illuminating the quiet corridor. Outside, the insects and Apo's sounds could be heard after the rain, and the last drop still fell from the eaves onto the tiled floor. Da entered the room and looked at Huyen. She was still lying peacefully on the bed, her eyes closed, showing no signs of waking up. The 4 bottle beside her was still slowly dripping. Micah stood next to her mother, softly calling, "Mommy," but Huyen still did not respond. Seeing Micah sad, I took her hand and led her out to the corridor to sit and rest. The two of us sat on a chair, silently watching the hospital room door. After a while I stood up and went inside to check on Huyen. Seeing that she was still unconscious, I gently went back outside. In this way Micah and I must have gone in and out countless times. One person worried about Huyen, the other missing her mother, so neither of us could sit still. The night grew deeper and deeper. The corridor of the medical station became quiet, only faint yellow lights and the shadows of the two of us waiting. The final infusion has finally finished flowing. I was sitting beside her when I saw the medical staff enter the room. Let me remove the needle and check on her. I quickly stood up to make space. He and Micah stood nearby, watching each of the medical staff and Apo's actions. The medical staff gently removed the 4 from Huyen and Apo's arm, pressed a cotton ball on the puncture site, and checked carefully. Then, the doctor came to examine her again. The doctor checked her breathing, observed the wound, and examined the areas on Huyen and Apo's body after the fall. From her head, shoulders, arms, and legs to the areas of impact, the doctor examined thoroughly. After a while the doctor nodded. There are no signs of abnormality at the moment. She fainted due to exhaustion, cold, and overexertion, but still need to rest and monitor further. When awake, it is necessary to eat properly and not attempt to do heavy work immediately. Da heard this and finally let out a sigh of relief. He kept nodding, carefully remembering every word the doctor said. Yes, I understand. Thank you, doctor. Then Da went to the health station and Apo's desk to settle the payment. He took the small amount of money remaining in his pocket, counted it carefully, and handed it to the doctor. Seeing the money in his hand decrease significantly, De felt a bit worried, but when he looked back at Huyen and Micah, he only felt relieved because at least Huyen had passed the dangerous moment. De returned to the hospital bed after completing the procedures. He looked at Huyen lying still on the bed, her eyes still closed, showing no signs of waking up. De gently called and Huyen's lytutien, go home. But Huyen still did not respond. He simply sighed softly, then carefully helped her sit up. Huyen and Apos' body was still weak, her head resting on De and Apos' shoulder. He turned around, bent down, and with all his strength carried Huyen on his back. De adjusted her loose hands, holding her securely. Micah stood beside, looking at her mother with sad eyes. De reached out and took the small hand of the girl. Let an Apos' go Micah we and Apos. Retaking mom home. Micah held De and Apos' hand tightly and walked beside him. The girl occasionally looked up at her mother on his back, hoping she would wake up soon. The three of them left the health station when it was already dark. The village road after the rain was still wet, and the sparse lights shone down on each step. De carried Huyen on his back, holding Micah and Apos' hand with one hand, silently walking in the darkness. Although his shoulders were tired and his legs weary after a long day, he still tried to walk steadily. In front was the small house where they had overcome many difficulties together. In the darkness of the recent rainy night, the silhouettes of the three gradually disappeared down the village road. A mother still sleeping soundly, a little girl holding her loved ones and Apos' hands tightly, and a man quietly guiding them back home. If everyone loves Huyen and Micah and Apos' mother, please subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and leave a word of encouragement for the two mothers to see the next developments. Every follow and every loving comment from everyone will be a source of comfort and strength to help Huyen get through difficult times. Thank you all very much.